Are you a super communicator? This topic has been all over, making all the headlines these days because Charles Duhigg came out with a book called Supercommunicators: How to Unlock the Secret Language of Connection. And he's been doing a lot of promo, a lot of marketing for it. He wrote an article for Harvard Business Review, so I thought it would be a great opportunity for us to dive in, see what factors he brings up, what does he point out, because obviously this is right up my alley, and it's something that I talk about with my clients all the time on how to have better connections and interactions with people, not just at work, but in life, in our day-to-day interactions, right? You don't have to read the book to join the conversation. I am kind of considering doing a book club on it if anybody's interested, because I definitely want to read the book. I am a fan of his work. I read The Power of Habit a couple years back when I was working in brain injury rehab, and I wanted to get a better understanding of how to help adults establish new habits and new skills. And his research and his storytelling was really impactful for me. I definitely am a fan of him as a writer and author and researcher. So I think I will be a fan of this new book. And I mean, hello, communication, duh. Let's dive in. So the article is titled How to Become a Super Communicator at Work by Charles Duhigg. In his quest to understand connection and communication, he himself has identified a few key skills or tactics that you can incorporate when you're having a conversation. And he's narrowing it down to the scope of workplace communication, corporate conversations, interacting with colleagues, and getting to know people on a better level. He says, great communication is a skill that nearly anyone can learn by taking the following steps. The first is preparing before a conversation. The second is asking deep questions during a conversation. And the third is asking and answering follow-up questions throughout the conversation. Let's dive deeper into each one. So step number 1, preparing before a conversation. In one experiment not yet published, focused on helping people reduce the anxiety associated with conversations, participants were asked to jot down a few topics they would like to discuss before a discussion began. This exercise took roughly 30 seconds, and often the topics written down never came up once a conversation had started. But simply preparing a list, the researchers found, made conversations go better. So here's the gist of it. And this is so spot on. Something I work on with my clients quite often is the preparation and the anticipation. I always say anticipate the situation before you go into it. Even if you cannot control what actually happens or how things are going to play out or what questions you're going to get or how someone's going to receive you, you can't control those things, right? But you can control how you show up. And so what he's saying here, what Charles is saying, is that they did a research study with people that hasn't been published yet, but essentially, the simple act of listing out topics that they would want to discuss with somebody was helpful enough to make them feel more confident navigating through a conversation, despite the fact that some of those topics never even came up. So it's not about like scripting out your conversations and having memorized answers so that you can pull out of your pocket on the spot. It's more so about the act of preparing and anticipating that helps calm your nerves and makes you feel more in control when you walk into that space, when you walk into that room, when you walk into the conversation, when you walk into the meeting. It's all about being prepared. And this, I feel, has probably the most to do with confidence building in general. Like people who are terrified of speaking in public or an upcoming situation that's really important to them, like a lot of those fears can be squashed or can be managed by simply just taking the time to confront the situation, acknowledge it, think about it, prepare for it, research it, practice it. I think sometimes even the idea of practicing is so terrifying because it means that it's real and that it's going to happen. And that if while you're practicing, you realize that you're having a hard time or that it's taking you longer than you wanted to, then that's going to make you feel even worse. And I mean, that's why I think the coaching sessions that I have are so powerful, because my clients know that they're not alone and that I'm there to help them through every step of it. But even if you have to do it on your own, I promise you, like, waiting until the last minute to figure these things out and to just wing it can really backfire. And if you start to practice and you realize, like, oh man, wow, this is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, or it's not coming that easily to me, or it's taking me so much longer than I wanted it to, like, that's your sign to just work even harder and spend more time practicing. You might not get to 100%, you might not be able to cover everything, but at least you will have a framework in mind. You will have a plan. You will have familiarity with the topic, with the pacing of it, with the content, and even just saying the words out loud and feeling it course through your body. Like, feeling yourself in your body as you speak is so different than just thinking it in your head. So standing up and rehearsing a presentation is so much more powerful, even if things don't go the same way on the day of. Like, that is so much more powerful to you than just looking at your phone and scrolling through the points, or avoiding it until the day of. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Step number 2, ask deep questions during a conversation. Once the conversation gets going, throw in 1 or 2 deep questions to help you get to know your colleague in a meaningful way. All right, how many of you, when you step into a conversation, there are 2 types of people that I've come across. And because this is what I do for a living, I'm super aware of it. There's 2 types of people. There's the person that's waiting to be asked a question, and then there's the person that's leading the conversation and knows how to have a natural back and forth, even if the other person is giving them nothing. Okay, so are you the type of person that when you meet someone for the first time, are you holding back and waiting to be asked questions about, even if you know that you should be, like, you're the new person and they should be wanting to get to know you? It doesn't always work that way. So a foolproof way to have a successful conversation, meaning one that feels good, one that feels like you got something out of it, one that feels positive, one that leaves a good impression, is when there is that give and take. When you ask questions, you give answers, you give questions, you give answers. You make follow-up comments, you give follow-up questions, even after you give an answer. So let's dive into what he says here. Okay. Once the conversation gets going, throw in 1 or 2 deep questions to help you get to know your colleague in a meaningful way. So what exactly does a deep question entail? He's going to describe what that actually means. A deep question asks someone to describe their beliefs, values, and experiences in a way that reveals something about themselves beyond the simple facts of their lives. It can be as light as, what would be your perfect day? Or as heavy as, what do you regret most? Some deep questions may not even seem deep at first. He's taking it a step further and saying it's not just good enough to ask questions like, hey, how was your weekend? Or like, what are you working on? He's suggesting that you go even deeper than that. Be more aware and observational, make comments about how a person is seeming that day or what might be going on with them underneath the surface. So let's see some more examples. If you're struggling to think of a deep question mid-convo, remember that nearly any question can be remade into a deep question. Ooh, okay, let's see. Typical question, where do you live? Deep question, what do you like about your neighborhood? Ooh. Question, where did you work before here? Deep question, what has been your favorite job so far? Question, where did you go to college? Deep question, what was the best part of college? Notice how questions about facts often lead to conversational dead end, right? Okay, where do you live? Oh, I live in Boston. I do live in Boston. However, these same inquiries recast slightly, like what do you like about your neighborhood? Invite others to share who they are. Good point. Now, I think it depends on the context here. Like, when you're in passing or you're in the elevator or you're by the water cooler or the coffee station or you're at the start of a Zoom meeting and you've got like 30 to 60 seconds for chit chat, I don't think you're going to have the opportunity to go that deep. But I think the point here is to just go the extra step, go the extra mile, even if it's not being reciprocated. That's okay. But if you are trying to make a good impression and you're trying to be seen, be recognized, be acknowledged, be remembered, be respected, I think that these small changes will make a big difference in the long term. And that just means being more present in the moment, being more curious about the people that you work with and showing that genuinely. And also being aware of what's going on with the people that you work with, like being aware of their background or where they live or what they're about, the things that they like, their family. Like you have to have a little bit of context to feel safe or comfortable going deeper. I find like I'm not going to meet someone for the first time and be like, tell me about your family. I just don't know if that's something I would dive right into in conversation number one, but it's something that could get me there as I get to know the person and work with them and they make comments because of the questions that I started asking them. Like, oh, do you live alone? Do you have any kids? Right? That might be a first time conversation question. And then after that, I might say, oh, so how would you describe your family dynamic? Like, are you guys really close? Do you have dinner together every night? Or do your kids do their own thing? Like, are they at their age where they want to be on their own? You know, there's all sorts of topics that might come up when it comes to like family life or life outside of school, out of work. But it really depends. It depends on who you're talking to. It depends on the context of where you're at and how much time you have and like why you're talking to this person. It depends on what you're looking to get out of it. So I do support deep questions. I think that that's probably better suited for situations where you have the opportunity to get a little deeper. Like if you're at a networking event or a happy hour, like a lunch and learn or a work event, or, you're sitting next to each other for lunch or you're waiting for a presentation to start and you've got like a decent chunk of time, 5 to 10 minutes. Even if you just kept it work related, going deeper on their work, like how are you liking your project so far? Or how has it been working with so-and-so? Or how has it been stepping into your new role, right? Like that's a good deeper question to ask someone at work. And maybe not necessarily like, what was the best part of college for you? I wouldn't get into that 5 minutes before a presentation, but context matters. Okay, let's go on to the final step that he recommends, which is to ask follow-up questions. All right, and this is going back to what I mentioned earlier about that back and forth give and take. One reason deep questions are so powerful is because they offer an invitation without overstepping into a demand for someone to reveal something personal. The best conversationalists ask follow-up questions that showed they were listening. Okay, so just how I said you need to show a genuine interest in people by asking them more engaging questions, like the type of questions that you're asking also showcase how well you're paying attention and that you're not just throwing question after question like an interview at them without really tapping into what's being said there and how they're feeling in the moment and where they want to go with the conversation. Because sometimes you throw a question out there and you realize like, oops, they don't really seem to want to talk about it, or they don't have the time, or they're not in the mood, or like something just happened right before this and now they're not in a good space. So you have to also show that you're paying close attention to them And Charles is going to tell us how to do that. One of the best things about follow-up questions is that they offer us an opportunity to reciprocate. Yes, for instance, let's say your work friend, mentor, or boss finishes answering your deep question, like what was your favorite part of college? I wouldn't ask that question. I would frame it more like, oh, you went to this university? That's great. I had a lot of friends that went there, or I heard they had a really great program. How did you like your program? How was it for you, right? Did you enjoy going to school in XYZ city, state, country? But if someone is sharing their college story, maybe you might want to say, what was your favorite part of college? I feel like I would ask that to a recent grad, like somebody who had recently graduated college or is still in college. I don't know if I would ask that to somebody who's like 10 years post-graduating and say like, what was your favorite part of college? I don't know. That's just me. I mean, no disrespect to this question. I think it's a good one. But again, it depends who you're talking to. Back to what I was saying. Sometimes people don't give you anything to work with and you have to make a comment or follow-up question to keep it going. So their example here is, what was your favorite part of college? And the other person says, oh, ultimate frisbee. But then they don't ask anything back and you say, oh, your favorite part of college was ultimate frisbee? Me too. Do you still love to play? So they acknowledge what was said, they made a comment, and then they offered up another follow-up question. Okay, so here's what I think Charles is really getting at with this article, and I'm assuming his book titled Supercommunicators. What he's getting at here is, in order to be a better communicator, and specifically how to have better conversations with your colleagues at work, is to anticipate the scenario, the topics, the people, the environment beforehand. That's number one. So just building a little bit more of that habit of preparing, making a list, doing your research, thinking about it, thinking it through. That act of anticipation will help to calm your nerves, to reduce anxiety, to make you feel more in control and make you feel more confident. Okay, that's number one. The next thing that he's really highlighting with the deep questions and then the follow-up questions, it's basically like the rules of having a conversation. And I almost feel like the art of small talk and the art of conversation and chit chat has been lost a little bit. And maybe that has something to do with what we all went through during lockdowns and moving to more virtual communication and sitting behind a screen in the comfort of our own homes, and how those little interactions and those nuanced situations have kind of been lost or not prioritized, or they've been difficult to recreate in this type of way. It's almost like he's reminding people how to have a conversation again. And on the one hand, it's great, but on the other hand, it kind of makes you think like, why is it that so many people are struggling with this? I wonder about that. I mean, I've always been hyper aware about these things, and I've always tried to go the extra mile with it. I always try to be conscious and aware of the other person. I don't make it about myself because I just don't want things to be awkward. And like, I'm already uncomfortable meeting someone new, obviously. Like, that's just how it is. It can be awkward and nerve-wracking. And so I'm just trying to stay positive and be engaging and like make things move smoothly, even if the other person is giving me very little to work with. But not everybody has that same approach. And I think it has to do with the fact that like people get stuck in their heads. I do too. Like we're all a little bit in our heads too much. We don't have these types of interactions enough. I think the exposure to situations where you're constantly being thrown into new interactions with people helps, especially for people who are more isolated or more removed from those types of interactions. I find living in a city opens me up to more of that because I have to interact with so many people throughout my day. Like when I journey outside of my home, But for somebody who's going from their house to their car to their office and then back, all you've really got are those interactions at work for the most part. And so Charles is really helping to tap into like, how can we make the most of them? If you are somebody who is struggling with it, or you're not happy with the way things have been going, and you feel like your interactions are lacking, and you're not getting deep with people. Again, they're not acknowledging you, they're not respecting you, they're not remembering you, they're not thinking of you, they're not giving you opportunities. Like, having those interactions and that small talk is like a direct link to helping people have positive associations of you and thoughts of you, so that they can keep you in mind when opportunities present themselves and when they come up. Those little interactions, the small talk that you have in the elevator or in the lunchroom, the cafeteria, around the coffee machine, or right before a lunch and learn, or on your commute in, on your commute out, like all of those little interactions, they add up and they have impact. They have a bigger impact on how people think of you, feel about you. And I feel like that's his whole goal here, is to just get you more aware of that and helping you to just in general understand how a conversation should flow. This was really interesting, very insightful. Let me know if you identify as a super communicator, if you feel like you're someone who nails it every time when you walk into a new conversation, or are you struggling in some of these areas? Do you feel like you're not having a really good back and forth with people? And are you trying to figure out why? Let me know down in the comments, and let's get to talking. Let's get to figuring it out together. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Let me know if you want to see more videos like this. I'd be happy to dive in to more topics and articles and research and books. Should we do a book club around super communicators? Let me know. I'd be down to host like a weekly get-together or a monthly get-together to chat about the book, answer questions, hear people's thoughts. I would love to do that. So just let me know. All right, that's it for me today. I will see you in the next one. Bye.